If you see a plant taller than you are with a stem covered in purple blotches and a flower head the size of an umbrella, do not touch it, do not cut it, do not pull it, because the sap on your skin doesn't hurt at all until the sunlight hits it, and by then it's already too late. That's the part that makes this plant so uniquely dangerous. There's no sting, no burn, no warning. A kid brushes past it on a creek bank. A man clears brush along a fence line. Somebody cuts a stalk down to make a toy telescope because it's hollow and it looks perfect for it. Nobody feels a thing. And then they go about their day in the sun, and hours later the skin starts to redden, and then it swells, then it blisters. Deep, fluid-filled blisters that look and behave like a serious burn because that is exactly what they are. And the scars can still be visible years later. This is giant hogweed. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to identify it, the 4 common plants people confuse it with, precisely what to do in the first 10 minutes if you touch it, and the genuinely strange reason this thing is here at all, because it did not arrive by accident. Somebody wanted it. Let me start with what it looks like, because identification is the whole ballgame here. This plant announces itself if you know what to look for. The first thing is the sheer size. Giant hogweed is aptly named. A mature flowering plant commonly reaches 10 to 15 feet tall and can go higher. That's not a weed you have to search for in the grass. That's a plant standing over your head, taller than most people's fences, visible from a passing car. The flower head is the second signature. It's a broad, flat-topped cluster of small white flowers arranged in an umbrella shape. Botanists call it an umbel. And on a mature plant, that umbrella can be 2 feet or more across. Enormous, like a white satellite dish held up on a green pole. Third, and this is the detail that matters most, look at the stem. A giant hogweed stem is thick, often 2 to 4 inches across, thick as your wrist, hollow, ridged, and covered in coarse white bristly hairs. And it is blotched. Distinctly, obviously blotched with purple and irregular splotches over green. That purple splotched, bristly, hollow stem is the single most reliable field mark this plant has. Fourth, the leaves. They are huge, up to 5 feet wide on a big plant, deeply cut and jagged with sharply pointed lobes that give the whole leaf a ragged, aggressive look, almost like a giant maple leaf that has been torn into deep points. Put those 4 together. Enormous height, an umbrella of white flowers, a thick, bristly stem with purple blotches, and deeply jagged giant leaves. And you have giant hogweed, and you should keep your distance. Now let me explain what actually happens to your skin, because the mechanism is genuinely bizarre, and understanding it is what makes people careful. The sap of this plant contains a group of chemical compounds called furanocoumarins. On their own, sitting on your skin, they do very little. That's why there's no pain, no immediate reaction, no signal that anything has happened at all. But those compounds have a very particular property. They are activated by ultraviolet light. When sunlight hits skin that has sap on it, those chemicals react, and they attack the DNA in your skin cells directly. The cells die, and your body responds the way it responds to any deep injury of that kind, with inflammation, swelling, and blistering. The condition has a name: phytophotodermatitis, plant, light, skin inflammation. And the light part of that word is doing enormous work, because it explains everything about why this plant catches people out. The damage doesn't happen when you touch it. It happens when you walk into the sun afterward, which means the person is never suspicious of the plant. They didn't feel anything from the plant. As far as they're concerned, they woke up with a burn for no reason at all. And that delay is why this plant keeps hurting people who are otherwise perfectly sensible outdoors. Every instinct we have for avoiding danger in nature runs on immediate feedback. A nettle stings, a thorn pricks, a wasp makes its point instantly, and you learn on the spot. Here, the feedback loop is broken. The injury arrives hours after the cause, often the next morning, and by then the plant is nowhere in the story. People end up in a doctor's office genuinely baffled, describing a burn they can't account for. Doctors who work in regions where this plant is established learn to ask one question: were you doing yard work yesterday? Because the patient almost never volunteers it. They don't connect the two events because nothing in their experience of the world links a plant they brushed past to a blister that appeared a day later. The reaction typically begins within a day, and blisters develop over the following days. When they heal, they leave dark, discolored scars that can remain for months or even years. And here's the lasting sting. The affected skin can stay abnormally sensitive to sunlight for years afterward, flaring up again in the sun long after the original injury has closed. And now the part I need you to take most seriously. If that sap gets in your eyes, it can cause severe injury. And there are documented cases of temporary and even permanent blindness. That is not an internet exaggeration. It is the reason this plant is treated the way it is by authorities. Anything that puts sap into the air near your face, cutting it, strimming it, mowing it, snapping a stalk, is genuinely dangerous. So how did a plant like this end up growing along American creek banks? Here's the answer, and it's the same story as half the invasive plants on this continent. Somebody thought it was beautiful. Giant hogweed is native to the Caucasus region between the Black Sea and the Caspian. In the 19th century, European plant collectors, and this was the great age of hunting the world for botanical trophies, brought it back as an ornamental, and you can see why. In an era when wealthy gardeners were competing to have the most dramatic, most exotic, most astonishing specimen on their estate, imagine a plant that stands 15 feet tall and crowns itself with a 2-foot disc of white flowers. It was a showpiece, a living statement. It arrived in British gardens in the 1800s, spread through European horticulture, and made its way across the Atlantic, planted deliberately in gardens and estates as a magnificent curiosity. Nobody was thinking about what it would do next, because giant hogweed does not stay where it's planted. A single plant can produce tens of thousands of seeds. Those seeds are carried by water, which is why the plant explodes along streams, rivers, ditches, and drainage lines. A colony upstream will seed everything downstream of it for years. The seeds can also survive in the soil for years before germinating, which means clearing a site does not end the problem. You're dealing with a seed bank in the ground that keeps re-sprouting long after the visible plants are gone. And where it establishes, it takes over. It grows early, it grows enormous, and those 5-foot leaves shade out virtually everything beneath them, wiping out the native ground cover. When it dies back, it leaves bare soil on stream banks, which then erodes. It's worth knowing where to expect it and what it looks like before it's giant, because that's when most accidental contact happens. It favors damp, disturbed ground with some sun, stream and riverbanks, ditches, roadsides, railway edges, field margins, and neglected corners of parks and yards. And it doesn't shoot up to 15 feet in one season. For its first years, it stays low, as a rosette of those big, jagged leaves close to the ground storing energy, and at that stage, it's far easier to walk into without noticing, because it isn't towering over you demanding attention. Then, when it finally flowers, it does so once, sets tens of thousands of seeds, and dies, which means the plant you see towering over a ditch in July is in the last act of its life, and its real legacy is already in the soil around it. So the plant that Victorian gardeners imported as the ultimate ornamental is now classified as a federal noxious weed in the United States. It is illegal to import, propagate, or move it. States have eradication programs. Crews in full protective suits, coveralls, face shields, chemical-resistant gloves go out to remove it. That's the arc, in about a century and a half, from prized garden showpiece to a plant that professionals will only approach in a hazmat suit. Now, the most important practical section of this video, because misidentification cuts both ways. People panic over harmless plants, and people walk right past the dangerous one. There are 4 plants commonly confused with giant hogweed. The first is cow parsnip, and this is the big one because it's the closest match, and it's genuinely common across North America. Cow parsnip is a native plant, and it's a similar shape. Same umbrella-shaped white flower head, same general family. The differences are size and detail. Cow parsnip typically tops out around 5 to 8 feet, noticeably smaller than mature giant hogweed. Its flower head is much smaller, usually under a foot across. Its stem is green, sometimes with a purplish tinge, but not that distinct splashy purple blotching, and it's fuzzy rather than covered in coarse bristles. And its leaves are broad and lobed more like a maple leaf, without the deeply cut, jagged, pointed edges of hogweed. One important note, cow parsnip sap can also cause skin reactions in some people, just far less severely. So the honest advice is to leave both alone. The second is angelica. Its flower cluster is rounded and dome-shaped rather than flat-topped, and its stem is smooth and purple all over, rather than green with purple blotches. The third is Queen Anne's lace, or wild carrot, which people worry about constantly. Look at the scale. Queen Anne's lace is a small roadside plant, typically only 1 to 4 feet tall, with a delicate lacy flower head a few inches across, often with a single tiny dark floret at the center. There is no confusing it with a 15-foot plant once you've seen both. And the fourth is poison hemlock, which is not a hogweed look-alike so much as a different danger growing in the same places. Poison hemlock is smaller with a smooth, hairless stem with purple blotches, ferny leaves, and it is lethally toxic if eaten. So, in exactly the kind of ditch where you're checking for hogweed, you may well be looking at something you also must not touch or ingest, which leads to the simplest rule I can give you. In the wild, do not put your hands on large, white-flowered plants in this family, and never, ever eat one unless you are an expert. This family contains some of the finest vegetables we grow: carrots, parsnips, celery, dill, fennel, and also some of the most dangerous plants on the continent. That's not a coincidence you can afford to be casual about. Now, what to do if you touch it? This part matters, and the first 10 minutes count. Get out of the sunlight immediately. That is the single most important step, because the sun is what triggers the reaction. Go inside, or into deep shade. Wash the area thoroughly with soap and cold water. Cold, not hot. Hot water opens the pores and encourages absorption. Wash promptly, wash generously, and wash anything else the sap touched. your clothing, your tools, your gloves, your pet if they brushed against it. Then keep that skin out of sunlight for at least 48 hours. Cover it. Sleeves, long pants, a bandage, whatever it takes. This is not optional. The compounds remain active on the skin, and going out in the sun is what causes the burn. If SAP gets in your eyes, rinse immediately with clean water and get medical attention. Do not wait to see how it develops. And if blisters develop, or the affected area is large, see a doctor. Severe reactions are treated as burns, and physicians can prescribe treatment to reduce the damage and manage the pain. Don't tough this one out. Finally, and this lasts far longer than people expect, protect that skin from the sun for months afterward. Sunscreen, clothing, shade. Because that sensitivity lingers, and people are genuinely surprised when a healed patch flares up again a season later. Now the honest limits, because I promised you a real picture and not just alarm. This plant is dangerous, but it is not everywhere. It's established mainly in certain regions, parts of the Northeast, the Pacific Northwest, and pockets elsewhere, and it's spreading, which is the concern, but most people in most parts of the country will never encounter one. The point of this video is not to make you afraid to walk outside. It's so that if you do come across a 15-foot plant with a purple blotched, bristly stem, you recognize it instead of grabbing it. Second, don't try to remove it yourself. I know the instinct. See a dangerous plant, get rid of it. But cutting, mowing, or strimming hogweed aerosolizes the sap, throwing it into the air and onto your face and eyes, which is precisely the worst case scenario. Removal is a job for people in proper protective equipment, and in most states you're asked to report it rather than tackle it. Which brings me to the most useful thing you can actually do. If you find it, report it to your state's agriculture, environmental agency, or local extension office. They generally want to know, they often maintain tracking maps, and in many places they'll handle removal. Take a photograph from a safe distance. Do not get close for a better shot, and note the location. Let me tell you what made this stick for me. It's the detail about the hollow stem. Because the stalks are thick and hollow and dry out into something like a natural tube, children have historically been injured by cutting them and using them as toy telescopes, blowpipes, or swords, putting the freshly cut, sap-covered end directly against their face and eyes on a sunny day. And when I read that, this stopped being a piece of botanical trivia for me. The plant doesn't look threatening. It looks impressive. It looks like exactly the kind of thing a curious kid would want to grab. There's no thorn, no smell, no sting, nothing at all that says, stay away. Every defense we normally rely on to keep us out of trouble in nature simply doesn't fire with this one. That's why identification is the only protection there is. And there's a broader habit worth building out of this, because giant hogweed is the extreme case of something more common than people realize. Look before you clear. Most contact happens during ordinary work. Clearing brush along a fence, trimming a ditch bank, pulling weeds in a neglected corner, where the whole job is done on autopilot, at speed, with a machine. Take 30 seconds to actually look at what you're about to cut. Wear long sleeves and gloves for brushwork, and if you're trimming anything unfamiliar, wear eye protection, because the entire hazard here is sap thrown into the air. And carry the general rule: unfamiliar plant, plus broken stem, plus bare skin, plus sunshine is a combination worth avoiding, whatever the species. Several plants in this country will do a milder version of this to you, and a few, like wild parsnip, do it in ditches almost everywhere. Let me answer the questions I know are coming. Is it deadly? Not in the way poison hemlock is. You're not going to die from touching it. But the burns are severe. The scarring can last years, and eye exposure can cause blindness, so it's treated as genuinely serious. Does it affect everybody? Reactions vary in severity from person to person, but the chemistry works on everyone, so nobody should treat themselves as immune. What about my dog? Pets can carry sap on their fur and transfer it to you, and it can affect areas of thin or exposed skin on the animal too, so wash them if they've been in it. Can I burn it? No, never burn it, and never compost it. Contact your local agency for proper disposal. What time of year does it flower? It typically blooms in early to midsummer when the towering flower heads make it easiest to spot from a distance. Is cow parsnip safe to touch? Safer, but not entirely. Some people react to it as well, so treat all of these plants as look but don't touch. And what if it's on my property? Report it to your state agriculture or environmental agency and get advice on removal rather than attacking it yourself. So here's the whole of it. There is a plant imported by Victorian gardeners because it was the most magnificent thing they could put on a lawn that now grows 15 feet tall along creeks and roadsides across parts of this country. Its sap doesn't hurt when it touches you. It waits for sunlight, and then it burns your skin from the inside out, leaving scars that can last for years and skin that stays sun-sensitive long after. You identify it by 4 things: Enormous height, a 2-foot umbrella of white flowers, a thick, bristly stem blotched with purple and huge, deeply jagged leaves. If you touch it, get out of the sun, wash with soap and cold water, stay out of sunlight for 2 days, and see a doctor for eyes or blisters. Don't cut it, don't mow it, don't burn it. Photograph it from a distance and report it. The most dangerous thing about this plant was never the sap. It's that it looks like something worth walking over to admire. So tell me down in the comments, what state are you in? And have you ever seen this plant near you? And if you've encountered it or know someone who's been burned by it, tell me what happened, because those stories are what make people careful. I read every single one. Next time, I'm going to show you a plant growing in the same ditches that looks almost identical to something people eat every day, and has killed people who confuse the two. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and remember, the plants that hurt people are almost never the ones that look dangerous.